My husband walked into my retirement ceremony at the Pentagon at 1:47 in the afternoon on a Friday in October, holding the hand of a woman I had never seen before in my life. She was 31 years old. She was wearing a red dress. She was smiling at him. He walked her past 4 rows of general officers, past the flag detail, past the color guard, past 3 members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff who had flown in from around the world to attend the ceremony, and he sat her down in the second row of reserved seating, the row directly behind my empty seat. The row reserved for immediate family. He did not look at me. I was standing on the small stage at the front of the Pentagon Hall of Heroes, in my dress blue uniform, with 32 years of ribbons across my chest, and the 2 silver stars of a rear admiral on my shoulders. I was 54 years old. I was about to be honored, in front of 200 people, for a career that had taken me from a small farm in eastern Ohio to a corner office on the E-ring of the Pentagon, and my husband had just walked his mistress into my ceremony. He thought he had ruined me. He was wrong, because in exactly 19 minutes, the Secretary of Defense of the United States of America was going to walk to the podium behind me, and the second sentence out of his mouth was going to end my husband's life. The marriage. My name is Rear Admiral Catherine Lawson. I served 32 years in the United States Navy. I retired on October 17th of this year in a ceremony at the Pentagon Hall of Heroes, and I want to tell you what happened in that room and how I got there, because it is the strangest and most important day of my adult life. I grew up in a town called Coshocton, Ohio. My father was a corn and soybean farmer. My mother taught 4th grade at the elementary school on Route 36. I have 2 older brothers, one a firefighter, one an accountant, both still living within 20 miles of the house we grew up in. I was the youngest. I was the only girl. And I was the one who left Aya. I joined the Navy in 1993, straight out of Ohio University, on a whim I have never fully been able to explain to my own family. I had never seen the ocean. I had never met a Navy officer. But there was a recruiter at a job fair in Athens, Ohio in the spring of my senior year, and he told me that the Navy would send me anywhere in the world, and I remember thinking, sitting at that folding table in that gymnasium, that anywhere sounded better than staying. I met my husband, Richard Lawson, in 1997. I was a lieutenant, stationed in Norfolk, Virginia. He was a civilian defense contractor from Northern Virginia, 3 years older than me, an engineer with a small firm that did radar work for the Navy. He was tall, he was funny, he came from a family with a house in McLean and a summer place on the Chesapeake Bay. He was, in almost every way, the opposite of the boys I had grown up with in Coshocton. We were married in 1999. I want to be very careful here about what I say about Richard, because for the first 15 years of our marriage, he was a good husband. He was. I want that to be on the record. He was proud of me. He came to my change of command ceremonies. He introduced me at his firm's Christmas parties as my brilliant wife. When I made captain in 2010, he threw me a party at our house in Alexandria and invited 40 people. The trouble started in 2015. That was the year I was selected for flag rank. I want to explain what that means, for people who don't know. In the Navy, flag rank means rear admiral, the general officer level. Only about 160 Navy officers hold that rank at any given time. When you are selected for it, your life changes overnight. You get a driver. You get a staff. You get an office on the E-ring. You get called admiral by people who used to call you ma'am. You also get put on lists. You get put on lists that go to congressional oversight committees. You get put on lists that get published in national security journals. You get put on lists that, in the year 2015, made a certain kind of husband very uncomfortable, because his wife had suddenly become, in the eyes of Washington, a more important person than he was. Richard did not handle it well. The first affair started, I would later learn, in early 2016. She was a project manager at his firm. It lasted about 11 months. I did not know at the time. I found out in 2019, when the woman quit the firm and sent me, for reasons I still do not entirely understand, a certified letter apologizing. I confronted Richard. He cried. He begged. He said it was over. He said it had been a mistake. He said he had been intimidated by my career and had made a terrible, terrible choice. I forgave him. I forgave him because we had been married for 20 years. I forgave him because we had built a life together. I forgave him because I loved him, in that quiet, worn-in way that people love each other after 20 years. Not with fireworks, but with the certainty that this was the person who had been there. I was wrong to forgive him. The second affair started, I would later confirm, in the fall of 2022. Same firm, different woman. This one was 31 years old. A systems analyst named Ashley Meredith. Richard was 57 at the time. I did not find out about Ashley from a letter. I found out from a hotel receipt. Richard had left his wallet on the kitchen counter in June of this year. I had been looking for a stamp. I opened the wallet. There was a folded receipt from the Ritz-Carlton in Tyson's Corner. 2 nights. King Suite. Charged to a credit card I did not recognize. A personal card in Richard's name that I had not known existed. I did not confront him. Not immediately. I did something else instead. I called my chief of staff, Commander Rebecca Torres, a woman who had worked for me for 9 years, who knew everything about my professional life and almost nothing about my personal life. I asked her to come to my house on a Saturday morning in July. I sat her down at my kitchen table. I told her the whole thing. Rebecca listened. She did not react. When I finished, she said, "Ma'am, when is your retirement ceremony?" I said, "October 17th. She said, "Ma'am, do you want my advice?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Don't say anything to him. Not yet. Let the ceremony happen. Retire with dignity. Handle Richard after. Because if you confront him now, he will find a way to make your last 3 months of active service about him. And you have earned better than that." I looked at Rebecca for a long time. Then I said, "Rebecca, thank you. I'm going to take your advice. But there's one thing you need to know." I told her the one thing. Rebecca's face went still. She said, "Ma'am, are you sure?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Then I need to make one phone call." I said, "Make it." The plan I want to tell you about the phone call Rebecca made, because it is the reason everything that followed happened the way it did. Rebecca called a man named Vice Admiral Michael Chen. He was the Vice Chief of Naval Operations. He was also, more importantly for this story, one of my closest friends in the Navy. He and I had gone through the Naval War College together in 2003. He had been the best man at Richards and my 10-year vow renewal in 2009. He had held my hand at my father's funeral in 2018. Rebecca called him from my kitchen. She put the phone on speaker. Michael answered on the second ring. He said, "Rebecca, everything okay?" Rebecca said, "Sir, Admiral Lawson is here with me. Ma'am, do you want to speak?" I said, "Michael, it's Kate." He said, "Kate, what's wrong?" I told him, "The Ritz-Carlton, the receipt, the credit card, Ashley Meredith." The fact that my retirement ceremony was on October 17th, and that Richard did not know I knew, and that I needed his help. Michael was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Kate, what do you want to do?" I said, "Michael, I want to retire with dignity. That's all. I don't want a scene. I don't want a public confrontation. I don't want to embarrass the Navy. I want to walk off that stage as Rear Admiral Catherine Lawson, and then I want to walk out of my marriage on my own terms." Michael said, "Kate, understood, but I need to ask you something. Are you okay with Richard attending?" I said, "Michael, he is still technically my husband. If I disinvite him, it will start a fight I do not want to have before the ceremony. He can come. I will sit him in the family row. I will not speak to him. I will get through the day." Michael said, "And if he brings her?" I did not answer right away, because, and I want to be honest about this, I had not, until that moment, allowed myself to think about the possibility that Richard would bring Ashley to my retirement ceremony. It seemed too cruel. It seemed too stupid. Richard was many things, but I did not think he was capable of that. I said, "Michael, he won't." Michael said, "Kate, he might." I said, "If he does, if he actually brings her into that room, I want you to know something. I will not react. I will not confront him. I will not say a single word about it during the ceremony. I will get through the ceremony, and then I will handle it." Michael said, "Kate, that is exactly what I hoped you would say. Because if he brings her, I want to make sure the ceremony handles it for you." I said, "What does that mean?" Michael said, "Kate, do you know who the keynote speaker is at your ceremony?" I said, "No, Rebecca hasn't told me. She said it was going to be a surprise." Michael said, "Kate, Rebecca hasn't told you because I told her not to tell you. The Secretary of Defense is going to speak at your ceremony." I stopped breathing for a moment. The Secretary of Defense of the United States does not usually speak at 2-star retirement ceremonies. He speaks at 4-star retirements. He speaks at Chairman of the Joint Chiefs retirements. 2-star retirements are handled by the officer's immediate superior, which in my case was Michael himself. I said, "Michael, why is the secretary speaking at my ceremony?" Michael said, "Kate, because in 2012, when you were the executive officer of that destroyer in the Persian Gulf, and you made the call that you made, the call that we still cannot talk about on an unsecured line, you saved the lives of 47 people. One of those 47 people was the son of the current Secretary of Defense. He was a lieutenant on your ship. He is now a Marine Corps colonel. He has been asking, quietly, for 12 years, when he could publicly thank the officer who saved his life. When your retirement date came up on the secretary's calendar last month, he told me, personally, that he would be attending, and he would be speaking. I did not know what to say. Michael said, "Kate, I did not tell you because the secretary wanted it to be a surprise. He wanted you to have that moment, and I honored that. But now, with what you have just told me about Richard, I need you to know. Because if Richard brings Ashley into that ceremony, and the Secretary of Defense of the United States is standing at the podium behind you giving a speech about the officer who saved his son's life, and Richard is sitting in the family row with his mistress in a red dress, Kate, I want you to understand what is going to happen in that room. Because I don't think you understand yet." I said, "Michael, what is going to happen?" Michael said, "Kate, the secretary is going to notice. He is going to say something, and when he says it, it will not just be Richard's marriage that ends. It will be Richard's career, because Richard's firm has 3 active defense contracts that require the Secretary of Defense's office to renew them every fiscal year. And I promise you, Kate, I promise you, those contracts will not be renewed." I sat at my kitchen table in Alexandria, Virginia, on a Saturday morning in July, and I understood for the first time what Michael was really telling me. He was telling me that if Richard brought his mistress to my retirement ceremony, Richard was going to lose everything. Not because I would take it from him, because he would have handed it to a man far more powerful than me. I said, "Michael, I don't want that." Michael said, "Kate, I know, but it's not going to be your choice. It's going to be Richard's." I hung up the phone. I did not tell Richard about the receipt. I did not tell him I knew about Ashley. I did not tell him that the Secretary of Defense was speaking at my ceremony. I did not tell him anything. For 3 months, I watched my husband. I watched him lie to me over dinner. I watched him tell me he was working late when he was at the Ritz-Carlton. I watched him kiss me goodbye in the morning with his mistress's perfume still on his collar. And on October 17th, at 1:47 in the afternoon, Richard Lawson walked into the Pentagon Hall of Heroes, holding Ashley Meredith's hand. He had made his choice. Now the Secretary of Defense was going to make his. The ceremony. I want to walk you through what happened in the Pentagon Hall of Heroes on the afternoon of October 17th, because I want you to see it the way I saw it. From the small stage at the front of the room, in dress blues, with my hands folded in front of me, and my father's Purple Heart from Vietnam, clipped to the inside of my uniform jacket where nobody could see it. The ceremony began at 2 o'clock sharp. Vice Admiral Michael Chen walked to the podium and delivered the opening remarks. He spoke for 8 minutes. He talked about my career, my first command, my 2 Middle East deployments, my 4 years on the Joint Staff, my final assignment as Director of Strategic Plans and Policy. He was warm, he was funny. He told a story about the time I had, in 2007, corrected a 3-star admiral's grammar in a briefing memo, and had been called into that admiral's office and told, and I am quoting here, "Lawson, you're either going to be an admiral yourself someday, or you're going to be shot. Get out of my office." The room laughed. Richard did not laugh. Richard was staring at the back of Ashley's head, whispering something to her. Ashley was checking her phone. Michael finished his remarks. He turned to me. He said, "Admiral Lawson, it has been the honor of my career to serve alongside you. Please stand for the arrival of our keynote speaker." The room stood up. The Marine Corps Color Guard opened the doors at the back of the Hall of Heroes, and the Secretary of Defense of the United States walked in. He was flanked by 2 Marine officers and a small security detail. He was in a charcoal suit. He was 68 years old. He walked slowly, with a slight limp, up the center aisle. As he passed the family row, I saw him glance at Richard. I saw him glance at Ashley. His face did not change, but he saw them. He saw them. He walked up to the podium. He set his notes down. He looked out at the room. He said, "Please, be seated." The room sat down. The secretary said, "Ladies and gentlemen, general officers, members of the Joint Chiefs, fellow Americans, family and friends of Rear Admiral Katherine Lawson. It is a rare privilege for a Secretary of Defense to speak at a two-star retirement ceremony. I am here today because 13 years ago, this officer, Admiral Lawson, did something that I have never publicly spoken about, and I would like, if the family in the front row will permit me, to speak about it now. He paused. He looked directly at Richard. He said, "Because I understand that Admiral Lawson's family is here today, and I would like her family to hear this." Richard sat up a little straighter. He put on the expression I had seen him put on 100 times before, the expression of the proud husband, the supportive spouse, the man who had always known his wife was special. Ashley was still on her phone. The secretary continued, "In the summer of 2012, my son, a Marine Corps first lieutenant at the time, was serving as a liaison officer aboard a United States Navy destroyer in the Persian Gulf. On the night of August 14th of that year, the ship encountered a situation. I cannot describe the specifics of that situation in this room, because portions of it remain classified. But I can tell you this. 47 American service members, including my son, were in mortal danger. And the officer who made the tactical decisions that saved their lives that night, from the bridge of that destroyer, as the executive officer on watch, was Commander Katherine Lawson." The room was silent. The secretary said, "My son called me the following morning, from a satellite phone. He said, 'Dad, I need you to know a name, because I do not know if I will ever get to say it publicly. The name is Katherine Lawson. She is the reason I am calling you.'" I saw Richard's face begin to change, because Richard did not know this story. I had never told Richard about August 14th, 2012. It was classified. I could not tell him. He knew I had been deployed. He knew I had come home. He did not know what had happened in between. He did not know that I had spent 40 minutes on the bridge of that destroyer, making decisions that had saved 47 people, one of whom was the son of a future Secretary of Defense. Richard's mouth was slightly open. Ashley had put her phone down. The secretary said, "For 13 years, I have wanted to publicly thank the officer who saved my son's life. Today, at long last, I have that opportunity. Admiral Lawson, would you please turn and face me?" I turned. The secretary stepped away from the podium. He walked across the stage. He stopped 4 feet in front of me. He looked at me for a long moment. He said, "Admiral, I owe you my son. I owe you my grandchildren, who exist because of you. I owe you every Christmas dinner my family has had for the last 13 years. There is no medal, no ceremony, no words in the English language that will ever be sufficient. But on behalf of the United States Department of Defense, on behalf of the United States Marine Corps, and on behalf of the Meredith family, thank you. Thank you, thank you." He rendered a hand salute. I returned it. He stepped forward. He embraced me. The room erupted. 200 people stood up and applauded. Richard did not stand up. Richard was staring at me with a look I will never forget. The look of a man who was, at that exact moment, doing the math on what he had just done, on who I actually was, on what he had brought into the room in a red dress. The secretary released me. He turned back to face the audience. He looked directly at the family row, and then he did the thing that Michael had told me he would do. He said, "I would also like to acknowledge Admiral Lawson's husband, Mr. Richard Lawson, who is here in the front row today." Richard stood up, slowly. His face was pale. The secretary said, "Mr. Lawson, I understand that your firm holds several active defense contracts with my department. I want you to know that being married to Rear Admiral Katherine Lawson for 26 years is the greatest privilege the Department of Defense has ever indirectly conferred upon a civilian contractor. I hope you have appreciated it every single day." The room laughed, politely. Richard did not laugh, because Richard had just heard what I had heard, in the exact same sentence. The Meredith family, Ashley Meredith, the woman in the red dress, sitting in the second row of family seating at my retirement ceremony, was the daughter of a business associate of the Secretary of Defense. I did not know this. Richard did not know this. Ashley almost certainly did not know that the secretary knew who she was. But the secretary knew, and the secretary had just, in front of 200 people, thanked the Meredith family for the sacrifice of a Marine's mother, and then acknowledged my husband, Richard Lawson, as a defense contractor married to me for 26 years. Ashley Meredith stood up. She grabbed her purse. She walked out of the Hall of Heroes without saying a single word. Richard sat back down, alone. and the ceremony continued. The aftermath. Richard's firm lost all 3 of its defense contracts in the first quarter of the fiscal year. I did not do this. I did not have to. The contract review process is entirely handled by the Secretary's office and the relevant program managers. Nobody had to be told anything. The contracts simply were not renewed. The firm's other clients, sensing weakness, the way clients always sense weakness, began to peel away within weeks. Richard's firm laid off 11 of its 22 employees in December. It filed for Chapter 11 protection in January. Richard filed for divorce in February. He did not contest the terms. He did not fight for the house. He did not fight for the pension. His lawyer called mine and told her, very quietly, that Richard wished to conclude the marriage with minimum public exposure. I did not object. I signed the papers on a Tuesday morning in March. I did not attend the final hearing. I sent Rebecca. She came back and told me it had taken 11 minutes. Ashley Meredith is, as far as I know, no longer speaking to Richard. Her family, her actual family, the wealthy Northern Virginia Merediths, apparently made it clear to her that she was to have no further contact with him. I am told, through channels I will not describe, that she has moved to Chicago. The Secretary of Defense sent me a handwritten letter in November. It was 2 paragraphs long. In the second paragraph, he wrote, Admiral, I did not know about your husband's guest until I saw them in the family row. I did not plan the moment, but when I saw what he had done, I chose to speak the words I spoke. I hope I did not overstep. Your dignity in that room was the finest thing I have seen in 30 years of public service. My son sends his love, R.M. I have that letter in a small wooden box in the closet of my new apartment in Arlington. I read it about once a month. I do not live in Alexandria anymore. I sold the house in December. I sold it fully furnished, because I did not want any of the furniture. I bought a 2-bedroom apartment in Arlington, with a small balcony that faces west. I put a bird feeder on the balcony. I bought a used piano. I have started taking lessons again, for the first time since I was 12 years old. My mother came to visit me last month. She is 79 years old. She sat on the balcony with me and drank coffee and watched the cardinals at the bird feeder. At one point she said, Katie, I am sorry about Richard. I said, Mom, don't be. She said, I always thought he wasn't quite good enough for you. I laughed. I said, Mom, why didn't you ever say anything? She said, Katie, because you were happy, and I wasn't going to be the person who took that from you. But I'm your mother. I always knew. We sat in silence for a while. Then she said, Katie, what are you going to do now? I thought about it for a long time. I said, Mom, I don't know yet. I'm 54 years old. I have 32 years of a Navy pension. I have a 2-bedroom apartment. I have a bird feeder and a piano. I have my mother visiting me for the first time in 7 years. And I have, for the first time in 26 years, nobody in my life who is measuring me against something else. My mother nodded. She reached across the small metal table on the balcony. She took my hand. She said, Katie, that sounds like a good place to start. I said, Mom, I think it is. If you have ever been publicly humiliated by the person who was supposed to protect you, if you have ever stood on a stage, or at a wedding, or at a graduation, and watched the person you loved choose someone else in front of a room full of witnesses, I want you to leave one word in the comments below. Just one word. The word that describes what you felt in that room. Not who did it. Not what happened. Just the word. Because someone in this comment section is going to read your word, and they are going to know they are not alone. And if this story reminded you that quiet grace defeats loud cruelty every single time, subscribe. Because next week, I am telling you about a mother-in-law who threw her daughter-in-law's medals in the trash. A 2-star general knocked on her door. I'll see you there.